Welcome once again to the Brownstone, Wolfe's sanctuary of logic, orchids, and murder. Do tell us where in the world you're listening from, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts. If you enjoy these cases, consider liking and subscribing. Now then, shall we begin? Every good mystery deserves good company, and a little gratitude between cases. A warm thank you to Norma, our newest patron. Your support keeps the orchids blooming and the mysteries alive. Join the circle of mystery lovers on Patreon. Link in description. Nero Wolfe and the call Saul shouldn't have answered. The phone started ringing in the wrong room, which meant either a wrong number or trouble. In our brownstone, both were usually connected. I was halfway through a crossword, 7-letter word for stubborn fool. Answer, Wolfe. When the bell cord near his chair twitched like an irritated snake. That meant he wanted me, and the sooner I answered, the fewer syllables I'd have to endure later. The clock said 11:48, which for Wolfe might as well be dawn. The rain outside was whispering to the windows, the city a wet hush. I crossed the rug, lifted the receiver and said, Nero Wolfe's residence. Archie Goodwin handling night traffic. Archie, Saul here. His voice was low, clipped, and had that sandpaper rasp that comes from breathing rain too long. You awake? Apparently. You want me to tell you the hour, or should I let you ruin the surprise? I've stepped in it. A woman hired me to tail a man, East 50s, near the Blue Piper Club. The man's dead. The woman's gone. That got my attention. Who's the deceased? Name's Martin Kells, small-time broker, big-time nuisance. I found him behind the club with a length of silk around his throat. She, Mrs. Lydia Eversley, vanished right after she saw the body. I could hear the static of passing cabs over Saul's line. And you're telling me this instead of the cops because I haven't decided whether to jump or swim yet. I need advice. From the next room came the solid thump of Wolfe's elevator and his tread, measured, slow, and disapproving. He appeared in the doorway wrapped in his yellow silk robe, looking as if civilization itself had committed a misdemeanor. I covered the receiver. It's Saul. Says he's found a corpse with accessories. Wolfe scowled. Confound it, I have instructed him. He reached for the phone with the air of a pope about to excommunicate. Mr. Panzer. Sorry, Mr. Wolfe, Saul said. I wouldn't call unless it was bad. I have no doubt. Yet you have chosen a barbarous hour to involve me in another man's murder. Wolfe's tone could have chilled soup. You will, of course, notify Inspector Kramer immediately. I figured you'd say that. Only there's a name you'll want to hear. Lydia Eversley. Wolfe's eyebrows climbed like slow elevators. He didn't answer for a full 5 seconds, which in Wolfe time meant an earthquake of thought. Mrs. Eversley, he said finally, once financed a bibliophilic society that owed me several volumes. I had not expected repayment in homicide. I leaned against the desk, watching the lines carve deeper into his forehead. So, what's the ruling, sir? Do we let Saul drown or toss him a towel? Pfui, Mr. Panzer is a capable man. He will inform the authorities, and that will suffice. Good night. Hold it, boss, I said. If Saul's client is the same lady who used to buy rare books for her husband's collection, this thing may have footnotes you'll want to read. Wolfe glared. Archie, your metaphors are execrable. Mr. Panzer, go home. I will consider the matter in the morning. Saul hesitated. For what it's worth, the guy had a membership card in his wallet. Eversley Club. The line went dead. Wolfe stood immobile, a large, motionless thunderhead. The Eversley Club, he murmured, a nest of dilettantes and financiers, half art, half arrogance. I grinned. Sounds like your kind of people. He ignored that. Archie, note the following. Mr. Saul Panzer has encountered a corpse connected tangentially to a former patron. It is imperative we remain uninvolved until consulted officially. You will therefore take down Saul's cab number because you'll want it later, I finished. His eyes narrowed. You presume much. I've had practice. I picked up the notepad and jotted the digits Saul had mumbled earlier. Wolfe made a small sound halfway between a sigh and a growl, which for him meant affection disguised as indigestion. Fritz appeared at the office doorway, sleepy-eyed but upright. Is something wrong, Mr. Wolfe? The telephone. Nothing that a return to bed won't remedy, Wolfe said. Except the rain, I added. That keeps calling too. Fritz vanished, shaking his head the way only a Swiss perfectionist can when chaos threatens his kitchen. Wolfe returned to his chair, lowering himself with the dignity of a judge sitting in eternal session. "It is almost midnight. We will not discuss cadavers at this hour." "Sure," I said. "Let's talk about rainbows." He shot me a glance that could have sterilized cutlery. I shut up, but not before saying, "If Saul's mixed in something sticky, we'll need to act fast." "I act when compensated, not when provoked. Our fee structure forbids sentiment." "Even for Saul?" "Mr. Panzer will manage. I will require beer." I fetched one from the cabinet, because Fritz would have needed to dress and light 3 hall lamps first. The cold bottle hissed as I poured it into the heavy glass and set it before Wolfe. He lifted it, sniffed, and nodded once. "Adequate." "Glad it meets your approval. The city's crumbling, but your beer's holding up fine." He drank half, set the glass down, and looked at me with eyes that had lost their usual glaze of detachment. "Archie." "Yes, sir?" "Should anything untoward befall Mr. Panzer before morning, inform me immediately. I would be displeased." I smiled. That almost sounded like compassion. "Pfui. I prefer reliability in my operatives. It is costly to replace them." That was Wolf speak for affection. I let it slide. I spent another 20 minutes filing notes and pretending to obey his order to retire. But something in Saul's voice, tight, cautious, stuck under my skin. He wasn't the panicking type, and calling us meant he'd already seen a shape in the fog that looked too much like his own. The brownstone was quiet except for the patter of rain. The street lamp outside made the window blinds glow faintly, slicing the room into gold bars. Wolfe sat immobile, watching the reflections like they might confess something. Finally he said, "You are still here." "Yeah, thought I'd type up the crossword solutions before bed. Keeps me out of trouble." He snorted. "Your facility with mendacity is unsurpassed." "I've been well trained." The phone sat in its cradle like a sleeping snake. I kept glancing at it, half expecting Saul to call again with an update or an alibi. Wolfe's eyes followed mine. "Archie," he said softly, "I forbid you to meddle." "Wouldn't dream of it." "Liar. Only part-time." He shut his eyes, signalling the discussion was over. I closed my notebook and leaned back, letting the chair creak. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere uptown, long and thin, like a bad conscience heading home late. At 12:07, Wolfe rose, slow as a tide, and started for the elevator. "To bed," he announced. "Yes, Mother." He paused. "You will sleep, Archie." That was the plan. The elevator door shut behind him with its soft, expensive sigh. I waited until I heard it reach the upper floor before turning back to the desk. The rain was heavier now, a drumming chorus. I wrote down the pieces. Kells, dead. Lydia Eversley, missing. Saul, compromised. Silk cord, strangulation. Membership card, Eversley Club. Underlined, it looked like a telegram from trouble. The phone stayed silent, which was worse than ringing. I gave it 5 minutes, then 10, then pushed back from the desk. The city outside might be soaked, but somewhere there was a woman with expensive perfume and bad timing, and a dead man who didn't appreciate either. If Wolfe thought I could just fold the case neatly into tomorrow's schedule, he'd underestimated my insomnia. I put on my hat and coat, not because I planned to leave, but because thinking in the uniform helps. I stood by the door, listening to the house breathe. The orchids overhead were sleeping in their humid little paradise. Wolfe's beer glass sat half empty on the desk, the froth gone flat. The bell cord hung motionless like a warning. I jotted Saul's cab number again, then underlined it. Whatever he'd stumbled into tonight, it had started with a phone call and a voice. And if I knew anything about voices, especially the kind that vanish after murder, they have a way of calling back. I turned out the light. The room went black except for the clock's pale face ticking toward midnight's tail. Tomorrow, we'd pretend this was still Wolfe's schedule, still his rule-bound empire. But for now, there was a whisper under the city rain, and Saul Panzer was out there listening to it. I'd be ready when it rang again. The coffee at Tony's all-night diner could strip wallpaper, which was probably why the regulars drank it. It kept their consciences awake. I was nursing my second cup at 2:30 a.m. when Saul Panzer slid into the opposite booth. His coat was wet, his hat wetter, and his face had the washed-out look of a man who'd been rained on inside and out. "She's coming," he said. "Don't ask how I know. She always comes back for the scene of the confession." I said, "If this turns into a séance, I'm billing you double." He gave a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. Outside, Times Square was a fogged postcard, neon bleeding through drizzle, taxis hissing like snakes. The door jingled and the night got expensive. She entered as if the rain parted for her. Tall, veiled, perfume preceding her like an overture. Even through the misted glass I could tell the gown was money, the kind that doesn't wrinkle because it never rides the subway. Lydia Eversley. Her gloves were pearl grey. Her hands trembled only when she thought no one was looking. "Mr. Pantzer." Her voice was low and careful, as though words cost extra. "Thank you for meeting me. And this must be Mr. Goodwin." "That's the rumour," I said. "We run a 2-for-1 special on insomnia." She managed a thin smile and sat. Saul poured her coffee. It steamed between us like the last trace of decency. "I must explain," she began. "I engaged Mr. Pantzer for a trivial domestic concern. The man who died, Mr. Kells, was only a casual acquaintance." "That's a fine word, casual," I said. "It covers everything from bridge partners to blackmail victims." Her gloved fingers tightened on the cup. "You're insinuating. Habit, ma'am. Comes with the territory." Saul shot me a look. "Archie." All right, I said. "I'll play polite." Lydia lifted her veil. Underneath was a face built for gala portraits and mourning regret, high-cheeked, pale, beautiful in a way that made honesty optional. I didn't know he was dead until I saw. She stopped, colour draining. "You understand, Mr. Pantzer." I panicked. "Understand? Maybe," Saul said. "But the police won't." She leaned forward. "Please, just an hour, to think. I can make everything clear by then." I said, "That's what everyone says before the cuffs click." "Mr. Goodwin," she murmured, "you think the worst of people." "Not true. Only of the ones who hire detectives and leave corpses behind." Saul sighed. "She's right about one thing. I owe it to Kells to tell Kramer. But she's asking for time." I studied her. The trembling had stopped, replaced by that particular stillness money gives when it's cornered but proud. "1 hour," I said. "Then Saul calls the cops, I call my boss, and you either tell the truth or learn how small a police interrogation room really is." She nodded. Agreed. Her purse clicked open. She drew out a silver cigarette case, sleek and thin as a promise. When she flipped it, I caught the faint shadow of engraving, recently scraped off. Red herring or clue, I couldn't tell, but it smelled like both. "Nice case," I said. "It was a gift." "From the deceased?" Her eyes hardened. "From my husband." "That's one way to keep it in the family." She ignored that and lit a cigarette with fingers too steady for innocence. The smoke rose between us like curtains closing. At 3:15 a.m., the rain eased. Saul left to make a discreet call to the precinct. His conscience had better stamina than mine. Lydia insisted on riding back toward the east side. I hailed her a cab, noted the license, and promised I'd call Wolfe. She thanked me with a voice that could have been gratitude or rehearsal. By the time I reached the brownstone, it was 4 o'clock. The city was a tired orchestra, packing up after the last tune. I let myself in, kicked the door shut, and hung my coat where Fritz wouldn't see the water stains. The elevator hummed. Wolfe was already awake. That meant one of two things. He'd either had insomnia, which he denied existed, or he'd scented a retainer. He sat in his chair, robe wrapped like Roman armour, watching me as if I were a late delivery from the butcher. "You have been abroad, Archie. Explain." "Saul's client came calling," I said, dropping into the red leather chair. "Name of Lydia Eversley. Tall, perfumed, looks like she was poured into her bankroll." His brows rose a millimetre. "Eversley, indeed. What does she desire?" "An hour of grace before we deliver her to Kramer. Claims she didn't know the stiff personally, though the lie's visible from Newark." "Oh, and she smokes her guilt from a cigarette case with the engraving filed off. Subtle as dynamite." "Phooey." Wolfe reached for the phone. "Mr. Pantzer will inform the police. That concludes our connection." "Except she's coming here at noon with $5,000 in cash." He froze, hand suspended. Archie. Your rule says no new clients before lunch, sure, but technically noon isn't lunch, it's pre-beer. His eyes glittered. Do not trifle with me. Did you invite her? I mentioned the possibility of professional counsel. If she shows up, it's destiny. Wolfe's lips compressed until they disappeared entirely. Your interpretation of destiny will be the death of me. Not unless you skip lunch first. He exhaled, long and slow. 5,000, you said? Cash. She rattles when she walks. Then I must suffer the intrusion. He rang the bell cord. Fritz appeared, immaculate and half asleep. Yes, sir? Breakfast. And afterward, a bottle of beer chilled precisely to 45 degrees. Mr. Goodwin will type a memorandum concerning this nocturnal absurdity. Yes, sir. Fritz departed. I grinned. That's the spirit, boss. Nothing like a little blackmail and murder to start the day right. Archie, your levity is offensive. Yet, he folded his hands, it may serve. You will interview the lady at noon. I shall remain unseen until she commits herself to veracity, or error. Meaning you'll eavesdrop, he sniffed. Meaning I will listen from prudence. Do not insult me with theatrics. I went to the typewriter and began clacking. The sound filled the office like machine gun fire in a velvet room. Wolfe closed his eyes, possibly praying for my demise. At 12 sharp the bell rang. Fritz announced, Mrs. Eversley. Wolfe muttered something in Latin and adjusted his robe. I stood as Lydia entered, sunlight catching the diamond at her throat. Up close, she looked more tired than tragic. Mr. Goodwin. Morning, or afternoon, depending on how honest your clock is. She handed me an envelope. It was heavy, thick with folded bills. Your employer's retainer. Generous of you. He'll need to count it personally. He distrusts arithmetic done by others. From behind the office door came Wolfe's voice, smooth as butter over gravel. Indeed. Mrs. Eversley, kindly be seated. She startled but obeyed. Wolfe emerged, towering, solemn, eyes half-lidded. I am Nero Wolfe. You will pardon my tardiness. I abhor mornings. I understand completely, she murmured. Few do. He opened the envelope, thumbed the bills once, then set them aside. Now, you claimed ignorance of Mr. Kells. I find that improbable. Proceed. She hesitated. He was attempting to contact my husband regarding a business misunderstanding. I wished only to protect my husband's name. An admirable instinct, if misplaced. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. And the scraped engraving on your cigarette case. Her hand twitched toward her purse. It was damaged. I had it polished. Badly, I said. Her chin lifted. Is this interrogation necessary? Absolutely, Wolfe replied. I dislike uncertainties. He leaned back, templed fingers pressed together. Mrs. Eversley, I accept your retainer. In return, you will give me facts. Evasion voids the contract. She rose. I have told you the truth. Not all of it. Colour flared in her cheeks. Then you'll earn your money proving otherwise. Wolfe's tone cooled. I intend to. When she left, the air smelled of her perfume and deception. Fritz reappeared silently with the tray. Beer for Wolfe, ginger ale for me. I said, midnight philanthropies pay well. He gave me a look that could pickle olives. Archie, if you intend to gloat, do so elsewhere. I'm not gloating, just observing the miracle. Rules evaporate when diamonds walk in. Pfui. I yield only to evidence, not ornamentation. Sure, and I only drink milk for the calcium. He ignored me, poured the beer, and lifted it with judicial precision. We shall see what Mrs. Eversley conceals. And Mr. Pantzer, already checking the club's guest list, I said. We're efficient that way. He nodded once. Then let us proceed. I leaned back, watching him sip beer while plotting the downfall of high society. You know, boss, if virtue ever goes out of style, we'll be rich. Archie. Yes? Silence. That was the end of discussion, the start of the case, and the first faint whiff of smoke that would soon be fire. At 12:03 the doorbell rang again. Kramer, not Lydia. She'd already left her retainer. What she hadn't left was clarity. Kramer planted himself in the office, eyes on the fat envelope on Wolfe's desk, and said he'd be back with questions if our mystery philanthropist tried to vanish. Wolfe regarded it the way a botanist might regard a rare fungus. Indeed, the medium of sincerity. He didn't touch it. Now that you have purchased my attention, Mrs. Eversley, perhaps you will spend it wisely. She hesitated, then drew a steady breath. Mr. Wolfe, my husband's firm, Eversley Engineering, handles subcontracts for the War Department. Mr. Kells attempted to extort money from us. He claimed to have proof of missing defense materials. It was all lies. I engaged Mr. Panzer only to find out who was feeding him false information. That is a more elaborate fiction than your earlier one, Wolfe said, voice like polished brass. Her chin lifted. It's the truth. Phooey. Truth seldom requires rehearsal. I cut in before she melted. Let's say we humour each other, Mrs. Eversley. You tell the story straight, we nod in the right places, and everybody gets home before Kramer storms in with a search warrant. She blinked. Kramer? The inspector handling Kells's murder, I said, and he's not a patient man. She bit her lip. Wolfe leaned forward an inch, which for him was a pounce. You were acquainted with Mr. Kells beyond the business threat, were you not? No, it came too fast. The bell rang, once, firm. Wolfe closed his eyes. Speak of devils. He pulled the bell cord. Fritz. Fritz appeared instantly, as if materialized by exasperation. Inspector Kramer, Wolfe said. Of course, Fritz sighed, and went to admit doom in uniform. Kramer entered with a cigar chewing its own smoke and a rolled newspaper in his fist. He looked like he'd come straight from the press room furnace. Wolfe, he said, you've got nerve. Your boy Panzer's name's in ink before breakfast. He slapped the newspaper on the desk. Headline, Private Eye linked to silk cord murder. Wolfe's brows arched. Indeed, the Gazette never fails to gild hysteria. Witnesses saw Panzer near the alley where Kells was strangled, Kramer said, with fine silk cord, imported, expensive taste for a killing. I whistled. Silk's getting hard to come by. Maybe it was patriotic. Shut it, Goodwin. Always my pleasure, Inspector. Kramer turned to Lydia. And you are, Wolfe's hand rose, a client. You will not address her without my consent. I'll address anyone connected to a homicide. You will, but not here, Wolfe said calmly. You may question her in my presence only if it serves your duty without infringing mine. Kramer puffed smoke like punctuation. Don't start quoting law at me. I needn't quote, I recall, Wolfe said. Section 79, Code of Criminal Procedure. Advice of counsel may be present during inquiry. That slowed Kramer's steam for a second. He shoved his hat to the back of his head. Fine, I'll wait till you finish your sermon, but Panzer's in a cell till somebody explains why a corpse got wrapped in fashion accessories. Wolfe's nostrils flared. Mr. Panzer's integrity is unimpeachable. If you prefer the Gazette to reason, that is your affair. I prefer evidence, Kramer growled. You've got any, hand it over. Not yet, Wolfe said, merely observation. He gestured to the glove box Lydia had left on the desk beside her handbag. Mrs. Eversley, this item, you carried it to the alley last evening. She looked startled. Yes, I dropped one glove. Is that important? Wolfe pointed. Observe, Archie. I leaned in. Along the hinge of the lid was a faint shimmer, threads clinging like spider silk, blue, almost invisible. Fibres, Wolfe said. Rayon, not silk, but consistent in diameter with synthetic blends. Curious, since Mr. Kells was strangled with silk. Kramer bent over it, grunting. You think she... Wolfe's palm lifted. I think nothing, I notice. Thought is for later. Lydia's face went white. Are you accusing me? No, madam, Wolfe said softly. Merely rescuing my operative from the gallows you and others are weaving for him. Kramer jabbed the cigar toward her. Lady, if you're hiding something, now's the time. She rose abruptly. I've told you everything. Indeed, Wolfe said, 3 times. The silence thickened until even the city outside seemed to hold its breath. Then Kramer straightened. All right, you're playing it your way, Wolfe, but the DA's not sentimental. If Panzer's name stays in print another day, I'll have to start digging where it hurts. Do so, Wolfe said. But mind the dirt you unearth. It stains easily. Kramer studied him for a beat, then exhaled smoke in surrender. You know, one of these days, I'm going to walk in here, and you'll be wrong. I await the novelty. He gave a half snort that might have been amusement and turned for the door. "Goodwin, keep your nose where it belongs." "Hard to, Inspector," I said. "The smell follows me." He left, door shutting with a tired thump instead of a slam. Lydia swayed slightly, like a reed after a storm. "He thinks I killed that man." "Everyone thinks everyone did," I said. "It's Manhattan." She sank into the chair. Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Mrs. Eversley, before hysteria conquers coherence, let us clarify your statement. Kells blackmailed your husband's firm. What proof did he offer?" "A letter," she whispered, "signed by one of our procurement officers. False, of course." "Of course," Wolfe murmured. "And where is this letter?" "Destroyed." "How convenient," I said. Her eyes flashed. "Do you think I would keep it?" "I think people keep worse." Wolfe rumbled a warning. "Archie." I shut up mostly. He addressed her again. "Madam, your predicament, though distressing, does not absolve you from candour. Did your husband know of your engagement with Mr. Panzer?" "No, he's abroad." "So you acted independently. Admirable initiative, dangerous execution." She rose again, gripping the back of the chair. "Mr. Wolfe, please, if you can clear Mr. Panzer, do it. I'll cooperate fully." "Splendid," he said dryly. "You already have, though unintentionally." He opened a drawer, withdrew a sheet of thick stationery, and scribbled 3 names in his precise, ugly script. "Archie, call Saul's associates. Cather, Durkin. I require their recollections of his movements." "Right," Lydia blinked. "You're defending him?" Wolfe's eyes met hers, heavy and calm. "Loyalty is not a commodity I exchange. Mr. Panzer has served me with unblemished competence. I will not permit folly or fabrication to destroy him." She swallowed. "I understand." "I doubt it," he said. "But you may in time." Fritz appeared silently at the threshold. "Lunch is served, Mr. Wolfe." "Lunch?" she echoed, dazed. I said, "Don't mind him, Mrs. Eversley. Homicide pauses for soup in this house." Wolfe stood, which for him was a closing argument. "Archie, see Mrs. Eversley to the door. Return in 10 minutes." Outside in the hall, she turned to me. "Do you believe me, Mr. Goodwin?" "I believe you want to live," I said. "That's a start." She gave a brittle laugh and hurried out. When I came back, Wolfe was at the table with his spoon poised like a gavel. "Sit, Archie. Eat." I took my seat. "Kramer's going to have Saul on toast if we don't move." "He will not," Wolfe said. "Kramer blusters, but he obeys the law as I obey reason. We are both prisoners of our creeds." "Nice creed. But Saul's still behind bars." "Temporarily." He sipped soup. "Within 48 hours, either Mrs. Eversley will reveal the truth, or I shall extract it." "By force?" "By intellect," I grinned. "Same thing, in your hands." He ignored that, finishing the soup with solemnity. "The fibres interest me, Archie. Blue rayon. A woman's garment, likely evening wear. Not Mrs. Eversley's, I think. Too coarse. Find whose." "That'll take legwork." "Indeed. Your province." He leaned back, eyes half closed. "This affair offends me. To endanger an innocent man for convenience is vulgar." "Your pride's showing," I said. "My honour, Archie. Do not confuse the two." Fritz entered with the second course. The aroma of roast capon filled the room, cutting the tension like civilized amnesia. Wolfe lifted his glass. "To loyalty under pressure." "Saul's or yours?" "Both." We ate in silence a moment. Then he said, "After lunch, call Lon Cohen. He will supply me with the Gazette's photographs. Somewhere in that vulgar parade lies our clue." "And if it doesn't?" He dabbed his mouth. "Then, my dear Archie, I shall reconsider civilization." That meant he was interested again, which in my experience was how justice usually started around here, between mouthfuls. The rain on 48th Street had opinions. It didn't fall, it sneered, slapping the pavement in silver streaks that bounced off parked cars and the hats of men with too much to hide. I pulled my collar up, lit a cigarette, and decided that if the afterlife looked anything like Midtown in a drizzle, I'd start behaving immediately. Saul's last known coordinates were behind the Blue Piper, a jazz club that did its best to sound exclusive and look legitimate. The neon sign flickered blue and pink like a dying conscience. Somewhere inside, a saxophone was practicing Heartbreak. I ducked under the awning and showed my license to the doorman, a slab of beef in a tuxedo who looked allergic to vowels. "Private inquiry," I said. "Not police. I come with manners." He grunted. That was the extent of his vocabulary. I took it as consent and slipped past. The inside was all shadow and brass. Smoke hung in the air like indecision. The band was packing up, and a girl with hair the colour of bad promises was laughing too loudly near the bar. I filed her under future complication. Rico Deno was easy to spot. He had the shoulders of a retired boxer and the grin of a man who'd bet on every fight. His suit was cream-coloured and expensive enough to make you wonder how he'd come by it legally. He looked up from polishing a glass. "You're not health inspection?" "Good guess," I said. "Archie Goodwin, Nero Wolfe's office." That name did a little tap dance across his face. "Wolfe? The big guy who reads while the world burns." "Depends on the reading material," I said. "I'm following up on a client's misstep, name of Martin Kells." Deno's polishing slowed. "Haven't seen him in a while. Shame about that alley business." "Yeah, he got strangled with something finer than his manners. You'd think he'd die where the lighting was better." Deno chuckled low. "You cops got jokes now." "Not a cop. Freelance curiosity." He poured 2 fingers of rye and pushed one toward me. "You look like a man who asks questions until he runs out of teeth." "Depends on who's swinging." I let the rye burn its way down. "Kells spent his last evening within spitting distance of your club. You see him?" "Maybe, maybe not. I don't log every suit that walks in for a bad trumpet solo." "Sure, but this one had a date. Woman, mid-30s, moneyed nerves, perfume strong enough to break curfew." Deno frowned. "I got a lot of those." "Her name was Eversley." That made the air heavier. "Never heard it." "Of course not," I said. "But maybe your memory improves if I phrase it musically. Say, a woman who spends time with Kells and has a regular table upstairs." He gave me a slow grin. "You got rhythm, Goodwin. But if I start naming patrons, the liquor board will start naming prices." I slid a card across the bar. "I'll make it easy. You don't have to name her. Just tell me who delivers her drinks." He tapped the card on the counter, then looked over my shoulder toward the stage. "Joni, guy wants to know how you remember his face." The blonde from before turned, her smile quick and bright like a flashbulb. "Depends which face he means." Deno said, "She used to take dictation for Kells before he stopped paying his bills. Now she keeps my books. She's honest enough not to steal twice." Joan Loring approached, balancing humour and caution on high heels. Up close, she had a kind of polished defiance that said she'd seen too many typewriters and not enough daylight. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "I've read about you. You're the one who keeps Mr. Wolfe from throwing clients out the window." "Only on even days," I said. "You knew Kells?" "I worked for him. Typing, filing, occasional flattery." "And at the club?" She smiled. "I like jazz." "Me too," I said. "But I usually don't attend the funerals of the band afterward." She tilted her head. "Are you accusing me of murder or poor taste?" "Both are punishable, but I'm just checking attendance records." Deno snorted. "You should join the band, Goodwin. You've got timing." I turned back to Joan. "Kells had a matchbook from the Eversley Club in his coat. Did he light your cigarettes with it?" Her expression didn't flicker. "He smoked cheap cigars. Maybe he found it." "Sure," I said. "They just fall out of society ladies' handbags all over town." Her smile froze slightly, then thawed into something sharper. "If you're suggesting I had dealings with Mrs. Eversley, you're wrong. I've never met her." "Relax," I said. "I only suggest things I can prove, eventually." She leaned in just enough for the smoke from her cigarette to curl around her voice. "Be careful, Mr. Goodwin. Some questions here get answered in dark alleys." "I like light," I said. "It shows the footprints." Deno cut in before she could answer. "Listen, Gumshoe, the Blue Piper doesn't need headlines. You start sniffing too close, I'll call my lawyer before you call your boss." "Good idea," I said. "My boss likes lawyers. They make him feel superior." I finished the rye and set the glass down gently. "Tell me something for free, Deno. Who pays for the music?" He raised a brow. "What?" "Someone's keeping this place open when the receipts say otherwise. Jazz may be eternal, but rent isn't." He chuckled again. "Ask the city. I just keep the band on tempo." "That's what worries me," I said, and headed for the door. Outside, the rain had turned lazy, drizzling like an apology. I walked the alley where Kells had died. The puddles reflected neon in crooked streaks, blue, red, and the kind of yellow you see just before nausea. There was chalk residue on the bricks where the body had rested. I crouched, examining a scrap caught in the drain, a matchbook half soaked. Eversley Club, no mistaking it. I pocketed it for Wolfe's inspection and lit a fresh cigarette with another match from the same wet cover. Irony's a good companion on wet nights. I found a phone booth that smelled like confessions and dialed home. The line clicked and Wolfe's voice came, calm as ever. "Yes, Archie? I've been mingling with music lovers. Found a blonde who used to work for Kells and might now be moonlighting for his enemies. Name's Joan Loring. Deno, the club owner, pretends ignorance with professional skill." "Indeed. Any injuries?" "Just to my sense of rhythm. The Blue Piper's off-key in more ways than one. Oh, and I picked up a matchbook. Eversley Club logo, waterlogged but proud." "I warned you against souvenirs," Wolfe said. "I'm collecting them for my memoirs. Title, The Dumb Things Archie Did Before Lunch." "Archie," Wolfe said sharply, "no heroics." "That's plan A with adjectives. Don't worry, I'm only flirting with blondes and fate." "Cease both. Return at once." "Sure," I said. "Anything else?" "Yes. Be wary of music. It seduces the intellect." "Noted," I said, hanging up. "And so do blondes," I added to no one. The rain picked up again as if to underline the thought. I watched the lights change on the wet pavement, red to green, green to red, the city's heartbeat keeping lousy time. I walked toward the corner where the taxis prowled, thinking about Deno's smooth lies and Joan's too quick smile. If Kells had been strangled with silk, maybe it wasn't a crime of passion, but of presentation. Some people kill to get rid of a problem, others kill to make a point. Halfway to the cab stand, a figure stepped out from a doorway, one of Deno's doormen. He handed me a folded note without speaking and vanished back into the rain. The note said, "She's not who she says she is. Don't come back tonight." That was considerate, as threats go. I filed it in my pocket and hailed a cab. Back at the brownstone, the world looked better through dry glass. Wolfe was at his desk, surrounded by paper carnage. "Report," he said without looking up. "Rainy, musical, and moderately enlightening. Deno's covering something, maybe for money, maybe for art. Joan Loring's either nervous or rehearsed, and I got a love note from one of Deno's gorillas warning me to stay home." "Excellent. That suggests progress." "Or early retirement," I said. "Take your pick." He lifted a hand. "Archie, restraint. Your tongue is a tool, not a cudgel." "Depends who's listening." He sighed, the kind that moves more air than emotion. "You will type your notes. Then you will refrain from any further excursions until I summon you." "Yes, sir. Anything else?" "Fritz will bring beer. You may have ginger ale." "Hospitality. Thy name is Wolfe." He ignored me, eyes narrowing on the damp matchbook I'd set before him. "Music," he murmured. "It deceives by pattern. This will be instructive." I grinned. "So will the blonde." He glanced up. "Archie." "Yeah?" "Phooey." That from Wolfe was practically affection. I went to type my notes while the rain drummed a syncopated beat outside. Somewhere in that rhythm, a truth was hiding, keeping time until we caught it. By early evening, the phones had gone quiet, but the city hadn't. At 9:15 that evening, the brownstone was so still you could hear Fritz polishing virtue in the kitchen. I was at my desk typing notes from the Blue Piper expedition when the door buzzer did a full symphony. It wasn't the timid kind either. It was the kind that meant a man had brought his temper with him. Wolfe's voice came from his chair. "Archie." "I know," I said. "That's not a guest. It's weather." When I opened the door, Inspector Kramer filled the frame like an angry sermon. Hat shoved back, cigar clamped sideways, overcoat smelling of precinct air and wet asphalt. He didn't bother with the courtesies. "Where is he?" I stepped aside. "Depends who you mean. Fritz is in the kitchen, Wolfe's in his chair, and I'm the one with all my buttons still on." He brushed past me. "Pants has been picked up. I want explanations, not wordplay." That made Wolfe sit forward an inch, which for him was like jumping up and waving his arms. "Explain, Inspector." Kramer slapped a file on Wolfe's desk. "Kells kept a diary. Typed notes, tidy as church hymns. The last entry reads, SP, tonight. I've got a witness who saw Saul outside the Blue Piper around the same time Kells stopped breathing. You hired him, Wolfe? You vouch for him? Fine. Start talking." I stayed by the globe stand, watching. Wolfe reached for the bell cord, tugged it once. That was his equivalent of drawing a weapon. Fritz appeared silently, carrying the peace treaty, a tray with 3 chilled glasses and 1 foaming bottle. "Beer, Inspector?" Wolfe said. "I'll drink when I'm off duty." "Then pretend you are." Kramer's eyes flared, then narrowed. "Don't get fancy. Saul's in a holding cell downtown. His hatband was found beside the corpse. Too neat, too new. You think he'd be fool enough to leave it there?" "No," Wolfe said. "I think someone else would be." "Prove it." Wolfe picked up the file, turned a page with delicate contempt. "The entry SP, tonight. You have concluded that denotes Mr. Panzer." "Unless you've got another SP on your payroll." "I have not, but language, Inspector, is a dangerous accomplice. SP might signify a place, a phrase, even a cipher. Did you test that possibility?" "We'll test it," Kramer said. "But until we find something better, Panzer's it." "Phooey," Wolfe muttered. I said, "Nice to be wanted, except by homicide." Kramer's glare hit me like static. "Keep talking, Goodwin, and I'll make you my next hatband." Wolfe intervened, tone smooth as butter over steel. "You will not threaten my assistant." "I'm threatening obstruction, not him." "Nevertheless," Wolfe said, "you will temper your zeal. Mr. Panzer's fidelity is beyond question." Kramer leaned forward on the desk. "Wolfe, I'm not enjoying this any more than you are, but your boy's neck is in a noose, and your lady client's the one who tied it. Bring her in, or I'll have a warrant so wide it'll cover your orchids too." That got Wolfe's full attention. "You refer to Mrs. Lydia Eversley?" "I do." "She engaged me privately. Until she releases me from confidence, I am bound." "Bound?" Kramer barked. "To what? Complicity?" Wolfe's voice went glacial. "To propriety." I saw the storm gather in Kramer's jaw, then drain away. He dropped into the red leather chair, exhaling smoke. "You always have to make it hard, don't you?" "On the contrary," Wolfe said, "truth simplifies everything." "Then simplify this. Your client's disappeared. My men went to her address. Maid says she packed a bag and left this afternoon. If she's innocent, she's got lousy timing." I whistled low. "So the lady takes a walk just as Saul gets framed. Neat choreography." "Don't get cute," Kramer said. "You find her, you call me. Otherwise, I'll have Panzer arraigned in the morning." Wolfe's eyes were half closed. "Arraigned, perhaps. Convicted, never." Kramer rose, buttoning his coat. "You've been wrong before, Wolfe." "Not about men," Wolfe said, "only about appetites." The inspector frowned, not sure if he'd been insulted or complimented. He nodded once. "I'll wait for your miracle till noon tomorrow. After that, I move." He left without slamming the door, which was his version of affection. I went to the window and watched the taillights vanish into rain. That's loyalty, boss. He threatens you like an old friend. Wolfe didn't answer. He sat motionless, eyes closed, breathing through his nose. When that happened, it meant the volcano was calculating eruption distance. "Saul's hatband," I said. "Too neatly placed, he's right. Somebody wanted it seen." "Yes," Wolfe murmured. "And not by chance. Whoever planted it required knowledge of Mr. Panzer's attire. Few have such access." "Lydia?" He opened his eyes. "Conceivable, yet premature. We must confirm she absconded willingly." "Want me to check her apartment?" "No." "No?" "It is nearly 10. The orchids require misting at 9 tomorrow. I must sleep. You will telephone the Eversley residence at 8 precisely. If she answers, you will request an appointment under pretext of routine verification." "And if she doesn't?" "Then," he said grimly, "we proceed from assumption to certainty." I sat down across from him. "Saul's sitting in a cell eating cold sandwiches and we're scheduling pretexts. Forgive me for asking, but do we ever try the fast lane?" "Velocity," Wolfe said, "is the refuge of the incompetent." "Fine. I'll tell Saul that next time he calls from holding." He scowled. "Your levity is misplaced." "Yeah, but it's loyal." That earned me silence, the kind that could fossilize air. I poured myself coffee from the side table while he took his beer in both hands like a judge lifting a gavel. Fritz had left the tray, shining between us. Wolfe sipped, then spoke, voice soft now. "Mr. Panzer once recovered my pocketbook from a thief who mistook me for a target of opportunity. I owe him a debt of competence. He will not suffer for another's duplicity." That was Wolfe's idea of an oath. I nodded. Then we find the lady. He frowned. We do not find, we deduce. You will telephone Lon Cohen in the morning. The Gazette will have photographed the arrest. Examine the angle. If Mr. Panzer's expression shows surprise rather than guilt, that will tell us much. Sure, I said. I'll check if he smiled for the camera. The beer glass hit the desk a little harder than usual. Archie? Just kidding, I said, mostly. He leaned back, eyes closing again. This case stinks of orchestration. Silk cord, diary, hatband, each an artifice designed for discovery. The clumsy precision of deceit. Meaning somebody's playing maestro. Yes, and I detest music when conducted by fools. I couldn't help smiling. You and the Blue Piper could start a club. Archie, spare me. He gestured toward the door. Telephone Saul's lawyer, arrange bail if possible, then retire. Your wit may be sharper in the morning. Sharper, sure. Smarter. Jury's out. I started for the hall. You want Fritz to lock up? He always does. Then I'll leave the porch light for Kramer's next visit. Do so, he murmured, but ensure it does not attract more moths. When I reached the doorway, he added quietly, Archie. I turned. Your confidence in Mr. Panzer, does it equal mine? Pretty close. He's too good to leave clues that convenient. Precisely. Therefore we proceed from that premise. He lifted the file Kramer had brought, opened it, and began reading with the same attention he'd give a menu. The rain outside thickened, muffling the street. At 10:30, Fritz returned to clear the tray. Wolfe handed him the empty glass and said, Inform me when breakfast is prepared. We shall begin early. Fritz blinked. Early, sir? Yes, 9. Very good. When the door closed, Wolfe looked up at me again. We are being tested, Archie, by someone who underestimates both loyalty and intelligence. That combination is intolerable. Then what's the plan? Sleep, then strategy. I grinned. Always nice to know which comes first. He waved me off with 2 fingers. Good night. I went upstairs, but I didn't sleep right away. The rain kept talking, and somewhere between its rhythm and the memory of Saul's calm voice over the phone, a thought kept needling. The silk cord, the diary entry, the hatband, all too perfect. When things fit too easily, somebody's forcing the puzzle. Wolfe would call it orchestration. I'd call it a frame job with a tempo. Either way, the tune was playing Saul Panzer's name, and if we didn't change it by morning, he'd be singing solo before a judge. There are few things more unsettling in this life than watching Nero Wolfe ignore his orchids. It's like seeing a bishop misplace his Bible or a banker forget to count. By 9:30, when the orchids were due for their morning misting, he sat rooted at his desk instead, massive, immovable, eyes fixed on Saul's manila envelope like it might bite. I'd been trying to coax him into speech for 20 minutes, which is about 19 more than any sane man attempts. You keep staring at that folder, I said finally. It won't sprout blossoms. Archie. He didn't look up. Open it. I did. Inside were Saul's surveillance photographs, grainy black and whites of Kells in various unflattering poses, smoking under a street lamp, stepping from a cab, shaking hands with a man whose ring caught the flash like a wink. The insignia was clear even in the blur, an E engraved in bold relief. Eversley's signet, I said. Well, that explains why the lady looked like she'd swallowed a lie the size of Grand Central. Wolfe's fingers drummed on the arm of his chair, a sound like distant thunder. You are certain? Positive. That ring's been on the society page more than the mayor. You think Eversley was paying Kells for silence? Or for betrayal, Wolfe murmured. In either case, Mr. Kells was punctual and indiscreet. I dropped the photos back into the envelope. So, we've got a blackmail scheme, a nervous wife, and a dead hustler. What we don't have is Saul out of jail. He finally looked up. Patience is the companion of certainty. I will have both. Sure, I said, and I'll have lunch. Fritz chose that moment to appear in the doorway, wiping his hands on a towel. Mr. Wolfe, the inspector telephoned. He requests your presence, mentally at least. He says it concerns Mr. Eversley. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. What of him? Fritz hesitated. The inspector did not specify, only that it was urgent. He awaits at the Eversley townhouse. I grabbed my hat. If he didn't specify, that means someone's dead. Pfui, Wolfe said. Eversley is a bureaucrat, not a corpse. Maybe he's both, I said, and was out the door before he could forbid it. The Eversley townhouse sat off Park Avenue, one of those limestone blocks that wear grief like jewellery. By the time I arrived, the place was crawling with uniforms and cigar smoke. I spotted Kramer near the foyer, leaning on the newel post like it owed him answers. He saw me and grimaced. Of course, I should have known you'd show up before the undertaker. Call it intuition, I said. What's the count? 1. Big one. He motioned me up the marble stairs where the air smelled of powder and metal. In the study at the end of the hall, Arthur Eversley was slumped behind his mahogany desk, head bowed like he'd fallen asleep mid-letter, except the letter ended with a bullet. Kramer grunted. Suicide, according to the early chorus. Wife out of town, servants downstairs, door locked, gun on the rug, all the trimmings. Except reason, I said. Yeah, that too. I took in the scene, the neat blotter, the fountain pen still uncapped, the half-finished note on the stationery marked with his crest. The top line read, "To my wife, I cannot," and then trailed into blank space. The next sheet beneath was torn clean off. You check the pad? I asked. Kramer nodded. Missing page, probably the note, probably in the gun hand's pocket before he pulled the trigger, except it's not. I crouched near the desk. The marble reflected his face in ghost tones. And the wife? Gone again, Kramer said wearily. Nobody knows where. You and your pet genius really pick 'em, Goodwin. Don't blame us for the casting, I said. We just critique the script. He puffed smoke through his nose. You tell Wolfe his boy's off the hook. Kells's death ties back here. Blackmail, money, guilt. Take your pick. I'm filing it as murder-suicide pending evidence. Pending, I repeated. That's a nice elastic word. Don't stretch it, he said, turning away. I left before the coroner arrived. Outside, the rain had started again. Thin, steady and humorless. Midtown lights smeared across the wet pavement like bruises. I found a payphone under an awning and dialed home. Wolfe answered on the second ring. Report. Eversley cashed out, I said. Gun, note and one missing page. Kramer's ready to stamp it tidy. There was a pause. Describe the composition. Standard farewell. To my wife I cannot. Then nothing. Page beneath, torn out. Pfui, Wolfe muttered. A man who intends suicide completes his sentences. The omission is fraudulent. You think it's staged? I think, Archie, that guilt seldom drafts its own confession. Someone required his death to exonerate themselves. Mrs. Eversley? Perhaps, or a more inventive party who understands psychology. I said, Saul's clear then? Yes. His tone was quiet, not triumphant. Saul is exonerated, yet I am not relieved. That's gratitude for you, I said. Our man's free, our villain's conveniently dead, and you're still sulking. Should I cancel the confetti? Archie, he said, you are flippant because you sense what I do. The pattern is too symmetrical. Life is rarely so obliging. Maybe death's just neater. Pfui again. Death, when tidy, is a contrivance. I got back to the brownstone just before 10. Fritz had left a tray of sandwiches on the stand, but Wolfe ignored them. The orchids still waited upstairs, neglected. The office smelled faintly of beer and disapproval. I tossed my hat on the rack and said, I saw the scene. It looked real enough. Wolfe gestured to the red chair. Sit. Relate every detail. I did. Eversley's posture, the torn note, the missing page, the servants downstairs. When I finished, he nodded slowly. Archie, fetch the photographs from the envelope. I handed them over. He examined the print showing Eversley's signet ring glinting in Kells's hand. The ring corroborates contact, he said. Kells threatened disclosure. Eversley silenced him, then found himself silenced in turn. By his wife? Possibly. Or by whoever profits from both deaths. Examine the ring, Archie. If the police overlooked it, they didn't. Kramer's men took it for evidence. Then tomorrow we request a photostat of the inventory. Under what pretext? Under none, I shall demand it. Sure, I said. And the DA will hand it over with a bow. He ignored me. This evening's development alters nothing. We have 2 corpses and a vanished woman. Find her. Find her how? She's probably halfway to Havana. Wolfe's voice sharpened. Then look halfway to Havana. I raised a hand. You realize, of course, that's not on the subway line. He scowled. Your levity offends logic. Then we're even. He drew in a deep breath, closing his eyes. I neglected the orchids. I must attend them now, or they will sulk, as you do. Go ahead, I said. I'll hold down the fort and write Saul the good news. Do so. And Archie. He hesitated, which was rare. Take care. Whoever engineers such symmetry may require a third note. Meaning me? He didn't answer, just rose, majestic as a courtroom verdict, and moved toward the elevator. The mechanism groaned upward, carrying him to his glass paradise while I sat tapping out Saul's exoneration on the typewriter. Outside, the rain kept up its quiet applause. Somewhere, a man had written half a confession. Somewhere else, a woman was rewriting the ending. And between them was a silk thread, the kind that strangles neatly, then disappears. If there's one sound that curdles Nero Wolfe's blood faster than a spoiled béarnaise, it's the rustle of a morning newspaper, especially when the headlines spell his name wrong, or worse, right. I was halfway through my coffee when Fritz brought in the Gazette, folded like a condemned man's last letter. He set it down on Wolfe's desk without a word. The headline did all the talking. Wolfe's operative linked to double death. I took one look and whistled. They didn't even use a question mark. Bold move. Wolfe didn't glance up from his book. Do not whistle in the house, Archie. Then you'd better read this before I start humming. He sighed, the deep tectonic kind that shifts continents, and set down Les Fleurs du Mal. I handed him the paper, still warm from Fritz's iron. He scanned the page, eyes narrowing like a safe dial. Ah, he said at last, Mr. Cohen's handiwork. Lon's a friend, I reminded him. A man's got to print what sells. Then I shall sell him to the devil wholesale. Before I could reply, the phone rang. I picked it up. Goodwin, residents of the maligned and magnificent, speak. Lon Cohen's voice came through in a sigh of smoke. Archie, don't start. You've seen it? Seen it? Clipped it? Framing it for the bathroom. Look, it's not personal. Editorial wanted blood on the page. You know how it is. Public loves a scandal, especially with orchids attached. Sure, I said. Flowers of evil. Headline writes itself. Tell Wolfe I'm sorry, Lon said softer. But the Wire Photo Bureau just moved a shot you'll want. Kell's passing a briefcase to that blonde, Joan Loring. It's solid. The copy desk says it came from police sources. Police sources with artistic licenses, I said. When can we see it? I'll drop it by before lunch. Off the record. Everything's off the record, I told him, and hung up. Wolfe hadn't moved, but his eyes flicked to me. Cohen? Yeah. He sends regrets and exhibits. Photo of Joan Loring playing handoff with Kells. Probably genuine, but doctored enough to win a ribbon. Phooey. He folded the paper precisely in half. Sensationalism masquerading as fact. Truth, Archie, is a modest creature, rarely photogenic. Try telling that to circulation, I said. Meanwhile, Saul's name's in every edition between here and Buffalo. Half the city thinks we're running a murder-for-hire agency. Wolfe tugged the bell cord once. Fritz appeared like a silent apology. Roast duck, Wolfe said, at 1, and instruct Theodore the orchids are to be misted twice. I shall not attend. Fritz blinked, troubled. Very good, sir. When the door closed, I leaned against the filing cabinet. You skipping orchids? This must be DEFCON 1. I am occupied with a greater hothouse, Manhattan, Wolfe said dryly. Every weed in it now thinks me fertilizer. Nice metaphor, I said. Shame about the smell. He gave me a look that could have frozen soup. You will refrain from humour. Sure. What do I do instead? Sit quiet while the wolves howl? Precisely. Boss, we're losing by forfeiture. Clients are dropping like flies on DDT. Saul's name is Mud, and you're ordering poultry. Archie, he said evenly, you confuse noise with progress. The more noise outside, the quieter we must think. Fine, I said. You think. I'll go bang pots. Desist. That word landed like a gavel. Desist from heroics. I require you alive. That stopped me. For a man who treated emotion like a foreign language, Wolfe's grammar just got fluent. Much obliged, I said, trying not to sound as startled as I felt. But if you want me alive, you might let me do something to stay that way. Sitting still's hazardous to morale. He reached for his beer. Morale is for soldiers. We are tacticians. Then maybe we should invade something. Enough, he said sharply, then softer. If we move rashly, we will confirm guilt by choreography. Let them play their tune. We shall dictate the coda. That was Wolfe for sit tight. Lon Cohen showed up at 12:45, trenchcoat damp, hat drooping, cigarette welded to his lip. Fritz ushered him in with the expression of a man admitting rain into a library. Lon dropped into the red chair and handed me a brown envelope. Straight from the Gazette darkroom. Keep it under wraps. The negative's already making the rounds. I slid the print out. The image showed Kells in profile, reaching out with a briefcase. Opposite him, unmistakable, was Joan Loring. She looked like she'd been caught mid-lie. Nice composition, I said. Rule of thirds and everything. Lon exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. Look, I know it's rough, but the editor's gunning for spectacle. They're calling it the Silk Murders. If it bleeds, it leads. Wolfe regarded him icily. Mr. Cohen, I have tolerated your friendship on the grounds of mutual civility. Today, you trespass upon that border. Lon winced. I know, but you've got to see it from my side. Pressure from upstairs, phone ringing off the hook. They want villains, not ambiguity. Ambiguity, Wolfe said, is truth's only native habitat. Lon crushed his cigarette. If it helps, I ran a side column, said your record speaks for itself. People will forget by next week. I shall remind them, Wolfe said, forcefully. Cohen stood. Don't go to war with the press, Nero. Nobody wins that. I will win by attrition. Now remove yourself before you are quoted. Lon looked at me helplessly. Tell him I tried. I will, I said, but don't expect footnotes. After he left, I spread the photo on the blotter. So Joan gets a briefcase from Kells, and a day later both of them are corpses. You think that's coincidence? No, Wolfe said, but neither is it conclusion. A photograph is an assertion, not a fact. Observe. He leaned forward, surprising both of us, and pointed to a shadow at the frame's edge. The reflection here, window glass. The perspective suggests a third presence, someone close enough to stage or witness. Kramer's boys? Unlikely. The inspector lacks guile. Then who? Someone invested in the narrative. Perhaps our anonymous composer of evidence. Great, I said. So while you philosophize, Saul's still public enemy number 3. He ignored that and reached for a note card. Archie, type this precisely. He dictated, to Inspector Kramer, I request immediate access to the police photograph log for verification of the Eversley and Kells scenes. The integrity of evidence concerns both our reputations. I typed it out. You're appealing to his pride. Better men have been baited with less, Wolfe said. At 1 o'clock sharp, Fritz appeared with the roast duck, its aroma cutting through tension like sunlight through smoke. Wolfe inspected the dish with ceremonial gravity. Join me, Archie. I'm not hungry. You will eat, he said firmly. Hunger breeds folly. So we ate. The only sounds were knife against plate and the faint tick of the wall clock. The city outside howled through the afternoon edition, but inside the brownstone silence reigned like a verdict. Halfway through, Wolfe spoke again. Public fury is ephemeral. Facts endure. Tell that to our bank account, I said. If this keeps up, I'll be selling the orchids to pay the phone bill. He dabbed his lips. A vulgar notion. The orchids will remain. The truth will feed us. Assuming the truth tips well, I said. His eyes met mine, and for a moment the weight behind them lightened. Archie, I have endured ridicule before. It is less injurious than your improvisation. That's practically affectionate, I said. You feeling all right? Your levity, he said, is my penance. We finished the meal in companionable quiet. Fritz cleared the plates and Wolfe leaned back, fingers steepled. Tomorrow, he said, Kramer will respond. Then we proceed. And if he doesn't? Then we shall provide him incentive. Meaning? He closed his eyes. Meaning I will speak where he listens, through the Gazette. Cohen owes us a debt of contrition. He shall print our terms. I grinned. Now you're talking headlines. Archie, he said without opening his eyes, I detest being quoted. Then we'll settle for vindicated. He let out a low hum of assent. the closest Wolfe ever came to comfort. The house settled into evening stillness, the orchids above, the duck's ghost in the air, and outside the echo of newsprint knives slicing reputation to ribbons. But I knew him. The quieter he got, the sharper he thought. And somewhere between the headlines and the lies, Nero Wolfe was sharpening back. Queens after dark smells like frying onions, cheap perfume, and things better not named. I'd been parked across from the boarding house for 45 minutes, long enough to memorize the flicker pattern of its neon vacancy sign and the rhythms of its clientele. The kind of joint where people didn't check in to sleep, they checked in to vanish. Her name in the register, Jane Lowry, had a shaky L and a confident lie, but handwriting has fingerprints, and Joan Loring's curves were all over it. She traded lipstick for discretion, but the alias fooled nobody with a pulse. At 10:13 she appeared, trench coat belted, a small valise in hand, and the kind of hat that suggested she'd learned to hide before she'd learned to trust. I let her get half a block ahead before tailing her east toward Roosevelt Avenue, where the streetcars whispered past like tired ghosts. She turned into a side street lined with shuttered laundries and a row of corrugated storage units. Her key scraped metal, the lock clicked. I drifted close, hands in pockets, pretending interest in the night sky. The moon didn't mind the company. When she pushed open the door, a sliver of light spilled onto the wet pavement. I waited 3 beats, then followed, slow. Inside smelled of dust, old paper, and a faint chemical tang that could have been turpentine or government ink. She'd set a small lamp on a crate and was kneeling beside a stack of tubes and folders, each stamped with the tidy menace of bureaucracy, Eversley Engineering and Defence Contract Division. "Working late?" I asked. She didn't flinch, just rose smoothly, the lamp painting gold in her hair. "I thought you might find me." "Then you overestimate my charm and underestimate my car mileage." Her mouth curved. "It's your persistence I counted on. You men with notebooks always show up when the music stops." "I left my notebook at home," I said. "I brought handcuffs instead." "Careful," she murmured. "You might give me ideas." She moved toward me, one gloved hand brushing the crates. "You think I killed Kells?" "I think you're rehearsing your denial. Try it again with less perfume." That earned a laugh. Low, tired, genuine. "You've got nerve, Mr. Goodwin. Or is it chivalry?" "Neither. It's Wolfe's expense account." She crossed her arms. "So what happens now? You take me to your famous brownstone and let the big man wring me out like a dish rag?" "That depends. You planning to tell me why an East 50s blonde turned into a Queen's brunette with a stack of stolen blueprints?" Her eyes flashed, guilt with a hint of defiance. "They're not stolen. Not exactly." "That's a new one. Borrowed government property for personal reflection." "I was told to move them," she said. "A courier job, that's all." "By who?" "Someone inside Eversley Engineering. I don't know the name. We used phone codes, drop points. I was just the middle." "Middle of what?" "Selling secrets," she said flatly. "Designs for a radar system. Kells handled the money. I handled the risk." "Nice division of labor," I said. "Except now he's dead, and you're running on a fake name." Her lips trembled just enough to show through the polish. "He double-crossed me. Told me the buyer backed out, then tried to keep everything. When I found out, I called Saul Panzer for protection." That stopped me cold. "You what?" She nodded. The call Saul shouldn't have answered. That was me. Under orders. "Whose?" Her hands fidgeted with the glove buttons. "The same man who said Eversley would take the blame if anything went wrong. Said Panzer's name would scare Kells into returning the plans." I whistled low. "Lady, you've got a talent for choosing employers." Her chin lifted. "I didn't choose. I was told. You think I wanted this?" I looked around the storage unit. The folders, the blueprints, the smell of cold ink. It wasn't the kind of place you ended up by accident. "Maybe not," I said, "but you've been cashing the wrong checks." "I didn't take a cent." "Then what's your fee? Patriotism?" Her voice softened. "Survival." That one landed. I could see the edges of fear now, tucked behind her poise like pins in a hat. She looked young enough to believe confession still bought forgiveness. She stepped closer. "You could help me. I know you don't believe me, but I didn't kill anyone." "Convince me." She reached into her coat pocket, drew out a folded document and offered it like a peace flag. "This is the list of code names. Mine, Kells's, and the one who gave orders. I was going to destroy it. I took it carefully, flattening it against the crate. The paper was thin, almost translucent, with typewriter impressions and 3 initials typed in neat rows: K, JL, and SV. "Who's SV?" I asked. She shook her head. I never knew, only that he was the one Eversley feared. He said SV had ears in every line that mattered. "Sounds like a busy man," she smiled faintly. "Or a careful woman." I pocketed the list. "This stays with me." "You'll give it to Wolfe?" He likes souvenirs. For a moment, we just stood there, the air humming faintly with the transformer buzz outside and the rustle of her breath. Then she said, "You're not half as cynical as you pretend." "Don't spread it around," I said. "It ruins my professional image." She took a step closer, close enough that the scent of her perfume, something sharp with lilac under it, cut through the dust. "Archie," she said softly, "if I asked you not to turn me in, I'd say you've got a lovely voice for bad ideas." Her hand brushed my sleeve. "Maybe you don't have to. Maybe you could give me an hour." I looked at her. The eyes were pleading, but the timing was wrong, the choreography too neat. Somewhere in her pose was rehearsal. "Sorry," I said. "Can't risk catching perjury breath." That got a blink, then a faint smile, wry, almost admiring. "You'd rather stay honest?" "It's a bad habit," Wolfe insists. The distance between us turned into something quieter, respect maybe, or resignation. She turned away, closing the lamp's lid, plunging the room into half shadow. "You should go," she said. "If they find you here, it'll look worse." "They?" "The ones who sent me. They watch everything." I hesitated, then opened the door. The street outside glistened under a weak lamplight. Somewhere far off, a phone rang in another building, shrill and brief, like punctuation at the end of a threat. Before stepping out, I said, "You'll hear from Wolfe." She nodded. "Tell him I never meant Saul to answer that call. It was supposed to scare Kells, not kill him." "Next time," I said, "try a postcard." When I reached the corner, I glanced back. The light in the storage unit flicked off completely, and the lock clicked again. I drove back to the brownstone with the paper folded in my pocket, thinking about the woman with 2 names and the voice that could sell a lie wholesale. Wolfe was in his chair when I came in, a book open but unread. "Well?" he asked. "She's alive, evasive, and fond of aliases. Confessed to couriering stolen blueprints. Says Kells betrayed her. And she's got a friend, or boss, initials SV." He lifted his brows. "And you believe her?" "Halfway. The other half still making up its mind." "Good," he said. "Then we are aligned." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Archie, you have a remarkable ability to extract confession without coercion. How did you achieve it?" "She tried to kiss me," I said. I refused. That got him. His eyes opened fully, and for a moment he almost smiled. Wise. Women's lips often conceal more than men's lies. "Yeah," I said, dropping into my chair. "This one concealed a whole conspiracy." He nodded once. "Then we are close." "To what?" "To whoever ordered that call. If there's such a thing as a quiet storm, it lives on the 2nd floor of a brownstone on West 35th Street. The orchids upstairs were getting their evening mist, but the real humidity was in Wolfe's office, brandied, charted, and pinned to the corkboard like a war in miniature. It was 9:10, and the brownstone had that after-dinner calm that means Fritz is washing the last dish and Wolfe is digesting more than food. He'd summoned me to set up the cartographic arrangement, his fancy way of saying pinboard, and I was now surrounded by maps, ledgers, and a tangle of coloured string that made the place look like a department store version of paranoia. Wolfe sat at his desk, immovable, eyes half closed. The only motion was his finger tapping the edge of an old ledger open to a list of payments. "Observe, Archie," he said. "Our late Mr. Eversley was not merely an engineer of defence contracts. He was an engineer of duplicity." "I've met both types," I said. "But this one did his math offshore." He grunted. "Quite. Each entry marked RD corresponds to dates when confidential plans went astray. A convenient euphemism." "RD? Rico Deno, I guessed?" "Precisely." Wolfe leaned forward. "Eversley used Deno's club to exchange state property for private profit. When Kells threatened exposure, Mrs. Eversley employed a pretext. a hired tail. Saul Panzer, unwittingly enlisted as witness and scapegoat. I straightened one of the string lines. So Lydia hires Saul to shadow her husband. He spots Kells. Then someone leaks Saul's name to Kells to make it look like intimidation. Correct. A telephone intermediary, Miss Loring. She transmits Lydia's panic, then silences the residue of conscience. That's poetic, I said, or chilling. Hard to tell the difference with you. He ignored that. Lydia Eversley thus orchestrates 2 deaths without staining her gloves. Miss Loring carries the weight, and Deno the profit. Except now Deno's still vertical, I said. Shouldn't he be next on the casualty list? Wolfe gave a thin smile. Perhaps he expects immunity through ignorance. I propose we enlighten him. Meaning? Meaning, Archie, we summon Inspector Kramer. I gave a mock gasp. You mean voluntarily? At this hour? That's not strategy, it's sacrilege. Wolfe rang the bell cord. Fritz, he said when the Swiss appeared, telephone Inspector Kramer. Request his immediate presence. Inform him that I offer conciliation and liquor. Fritz hesitated only long enough to show concern for the furniture. Yes, sir. As he left, I said, You really think Kramer will drop everything for brandy? Not for brandy, for victory. Kramer arrived 20 minutes later, smelling of cigar smoke and suspicion. He paused just inside the door, eyes narrowing at the battlefield of charts and papers. I should have brought a platoon, he said. What's this? Vichy headquarters? Sit, Inspector, Wolfe said mildly. You'll find the chair more accommodating than sarcasm. Kramer grunted, dropped into the red chair and pulled out a cigar. You said you had cooperation to offer. I'm here before I come to my senses. Wolfe lifted the brandy decanter and poured 3 measures, 1 for each of us. Archie, serve. Kramer eyed the glass suspiciously before taking it. What's the catch? The catch, Wolfe said, is that you are losing patience and I am losing leisure. Both are intolerable. I'm listening, Kramer said, lighting the cigar. Wolfe gestured to the ledger. Arthur Eversley maintained 2 sets of accounts, one domestic, one liberated. The latter lists recurring payments to a man abbreviated R.D. You recall Mr. Deno, proprietor of the Blue Piper? I recall him, Kramer said. Smooth talker. Claimed he'd never heard of blueprints outside of wallpaper. Lies, Wolfe said simply. Deno facilitated the exchange of defense schematics for cash. Mrs. Eversley, fearing exposure, hired my operative Mr. Panzer to observe her husband. Mr. Kells discovered the surveillance, assumed blackmail, and died by strangulation, courtesy of Miss Loring, under Mrs. Eversley's orders. Kramer blew smoke. That's a nice bedtime story. Where's your proof? Wolfe's eyes glinted. The proof, Inspector, lies in orchestration. Every note aligns, the call Saul shouldn't have answered, the planted hat band, the missing note page, the ledger itself. It is not conjecture, but composition. Yeah, a jury won't buy poetry either. I said, he's offering a sting, not a sonnet. Kramer turned to me. A sting? Sure. Lydia's expecting the last batch of blueprints to be cleared from storage. Wolfe's got Joan Loring pegged as the delivery system. You let the handoff happen under watch. Kramer chewed his cigar. And you're in the audience, I suppose? Front row, I said. No applause until the curtains drop. He eyed Wolfe. You trust him that much? I trust his logic, Wolfe said. It is the only faculty not corrupted by ambition. Kramer snorted. You're not wrong. All right. What's the setup? Wolfe leaned back, fingers steepled. Tomorrow at 9:30 p.m. at the Blue Piper, Miss Loring will come to complete the handoff. We'll keep daytime watch on the Queen's storage at 11, but the take happens at the club. Kramer frowned. You already told me the intermediary's Loring. Indeed, Wolfe said. But she does not act alone. There is a courier, an agent known to Miss Loring only as SV. I suspect that designation conceals our Mr. Deno's true name, Silvio Victor Deno. Kramer's head jerked up. His middle name's Victor? Registered on his liquor license, Wolfe said. I confirmed it this afternoon. Coincidence is a lazy refuge. Kramer exhaled, smoke curling like thought. So Deno's the bagman, Lydia's the financier, and your girl Loring's the trigger. Correct. Then where do you fit in? Wolfe's tone turned crisp. I fit nowhere, Inspector. I provide perspective. The difference between your net and my mind is that mine closes first. Kramer gave a crooked grin. You'd make a hell of a cop if you weren't allergic to work. Phooey, I abhor redundancy. He rose, pacing. All right, I'll play it. My men'll be at both points. But if this blows up— It won't, Wolfe said, if you adhere precisely to my instruction. Kramer looked at me. And you? I follow instructions like a saint, I said, when convenient. That earned me the first smile of the night, from both of them, though Wolfe disguised his under a cough. Miracle on 35th Street, I said. Wolfe and Kramer in the same trench. I should sell tickets. Kramer jabbed a thumb at me. Keep your wisecracks on the record, Goodwin. I might need them for evidence. Wolfe cleared his throat. You will proceed quietly. No public warrants. Miss Loring must believe she's free of suspicion. I'll manage it, Kramer said, buttoning his coat. You've got a habit of being right, Wolfe. I just hate admitting it. I shall not press you, Wolfe said. Your cooperation suffices. Kramer paused at the door. If this works, I'll call it luck. If it doesn't, you'll call it logic misunderstood, Wolfe finished. That shut him up, though he left the cigar butts smouldering in the ashtray like punctuation. When the door closed, I exhaled. I've seen détente before, but this one deserves a parade. You really think Kramer will keep it clean? He will, Wolfe said. The inspector's virtue is his exhaustion. Only the weary respect precision. Lovely, I said. Now that you've drafted your peace treaty, what's my part? You, he said, will accompany Mr. Pantzer to Queen's and observe Miss Loring's approach. No interference unless life is threatened. Your presence will steady him. Or distract her, I said. He glared. Archie, you are incorrigible and indispensable. That's practically affectionate. He reached for his brandy. Do not mistake gratitude for sentiment. Wouldn't dream of it, I said. Still, nice to hear you prefer me alive. He raised his glass slightly. For strategic reasons. I grinned. Sure, strategy always sounds better after brandy. He looked at the map again, the red strings crossing like veins under lamplight. Tomorrow, he said softly, the pattern completes, then the threads will tighten. Let's hope we're not the ones they're tied around, I said. He didn't answer. The office fell into its familiar silence, the kind that hums with unspoken calculations. Outside, Manhattan exhaled through the open window, the city's breath mixing with the faint scent of orchids drifting down from above. Another quiet storm gathering, and this one I knew would break right on time. The Blue Piper had never heard so much silence. Sure, the saxophones were still blowing something sultry in the front lounge, and the air still shimmered with cigarette haze and bourbon breath, but under it all was the kind of hush you get right before the curtain drops, or the shot fires. Saul Pantzer sat across from me in the back room, cool as a marble chess piece. He'd shaved the jail stubble, combed his hair, and looked every inch the operative who'd just been sprung to spring someone else. Between us sat a small portable recorder disguised as a cigarette box, and behind the panelling, 3 of Kramer's men wired up tighter than the brass section outside. Showtime, I murmured. You sure about this? Saul nodded once. You said Wolfe's listening in? Yeah. Fritz patched the phone line straight from here to the brownstone. The big man's got his ears on, though don't expect applause. Saul grinned faintly. Never do. Earlier that day, at 11 on the dot, the Queen's storage unit's side door rolled up under quiet watch. No interference. Now, at 9:30, the Blue Piper heard more silence than jazz, every step rehearsed. Mink collar, pearls, and that faint perfume that could sell innocence wholesale. Her eyes flicked between us, first suspicion, then calculation. Mr. Goodwin, she said, I was told Miss Loring would be here. She's fashionably late, I said. You know how couriers are, always stuck in traffic between truth and delivery. She ignored that. I assume you have something for me? Depends what you ordered. A drink, a confession, or just a good night's sleep? Her mouth tightened. You think this is amusing? Lady, at this point amusement's all that keeps me from drinking the furniture polish. The door creaked again, and Joan Loring slipped in, hat low, gloves immaculate, face set in porcelain calm. She held a manila envelope like it contained the last piece of decency on earth. Lydia straightened. "You have my letter?" she demanded. Joan's voice came soft. "Not exactly. I have your voice, on wire." For a moment nobody breathed. Then Joan placed the envelope on the table and slid it forward. Inside was a small spool of wire. Saul took it, loaded it into the recorder, and flicked the switch. The machine hummed, then crackled. A second later, the sound of a woman's voice filled the room, low, deliberate, unmistakable. "Kells must be silenced tonight. Use Panzer's name if you must. It will divert suspicion. The payment will be made at Deno's." Lydia's hand jerked as if she'd been slapped. That's been doctored." "Sure," I said mildly. "All the best murder orders are." Her eyes darted to the corners of the room. "You're recording now, aren't you? This is entrapment." "Call it public service," I said. "The taxpayers get bored." She rose, clutching her handbag. "You'll regret this. All of you." "Careful," I said. "That's almost a quote from your own greatest hit." Joan stepped back, her composure cracking. "I told you, Lydia. They'd find out. It was supposed to end with Kells, not Saul." "Quiet," Lydia hissed. "You've done enough damage." She turned and bolted for the hallway, heels hammering against the tile. I was after her before Saul could stand, shouting for the plainclothes boys outside, but the club's saxophone bled through the air, loud, chaotic, swallowing the sound of running feet. Lydia burst into Deno's private office at the end of the corridor. I hit the door a second later and stopped cold. She was behind Deno's mahogany desk, handbag open, small pistol in hand. "Stay back, Mr. Goodwin." "Sure," I said. "But if you plan to shoot, do me a favor and miss wide. Wolfe hates paperwork." Her eyes were glassy, unfocused. "You think you're clever, you and your fat magician on the telephone." "Not magic," I said. "Just good acoustics. He's listening, by the way." Across the room, the phone on Deno's desk was off the hook, the line open. I could hear the faint background hum, the brownstones line patched through. Somewhere, miles uptown, Wolfe was listening to every word with the patience of a hanging judge. Lydia's hand trembled. "They'll never believe that voice is mine. I was framed. I'll tell them it was Joan." "She's already confessed her part," I said. "Only thing left to settle is yours." "You don't understand," she said desperately. "It was Eversley. He wanted the money moved overseas. I was just protecting what was mine." "By hiring a hit through a nightclub line? That's a rough way to balance a checkbook." She raised the gun higher. "Don't come closer." "I'm fine right here." I eased one foot forward anyway. "Look, Lydia, nobody's naming streets after you. Put it down. You'll get a hearing, maybe even sympathy." Her lip curled. "Sympathy is for fools." "Yeah," I said, "and so is murder. Trouble is, it doesn't stay quiet. It keeps talking, on tape." She flinched at that, a quick flick of the eyes toward the machine still humming faintly in my hand. That was all the gap I needed. I lunged. The gun went off once, loud enough to make the window rattle. The slug buried itself in Deno's framed liquor license. I grabbed her wrist, twisted, and the pistol clattered across the carpet. She sagged into the chair, gasping. Saul and two of Kramer's men piled in right behind me. The taller cop scooped up the gun. The other snapped cuffs on her wrists. Kramer himself stormed in a minute later, coat open, cigar clenched. He looked from Lydia to me to the phone on the desk. "You all in one piece?" "Mostly," I said. She missed my tie by a whisper, which is a tragedy. This one's silk. He grunted. "Wolfe on the line?" I nodded and handed him the receiver. Kramer hesitated, then spoke gruffly. "Yeah, Wolfe, we've got her. Recording's good. Gun fired once. No casualties." There was a pause, then Wolfe's voice came through, rich and cool as brandy. "Excellent. Inspector, please convey to Mrs. Eversley my professional gratitude for confirming my hypothesis." Kramer scowled. "She can hear you." "Good," Wolfe said. "Then she may contemplate the irony of confession through her own contrivance. Miss Loring's recording will suffice as corroboration." Lydia let out a small, bitter laugh. "You think you've won?" Wolfe's tone sharpened. "Madam, justice is not a contest. It is an equilibrium restored." Kramer rolled his eyes. "You done philosophizing, Wolfe?" "For the moment. Archie?" "Still here, boss." Commendable restraint with the firearm. I was motivated. I like breathing. Then return at once. There remains the matter of Miss Loring's immunity. Fritz will prepare a late supper. Duck or crow? I asked. Phooey, Wolfe said, and the line clicked dead. Kramer replaced the receiver and rubbed his forehead. Every time I deal with that man, I feel like I've been outmaneuvered by a dictionary. Don't feel bad, I said. He's got the unabridged edition. He looked at Lydia, now quiet and pale. Get her downtown, he told his men. Handle her carefully. She's more dangerous with her mouth than that gun. When they'd gone, I turned to Saul. Well, partner, that's another day's work for the unemployed. He gave a faint smile. Glad to be working again. Don't get used to it, I said. Wolfe pays in gratitude and adjectives. We walked out through the main lounge, where the band had picked up again. The saxophone moaned like it knew the ending. Outside, the rain had started, a thin, misty drizzle that made the street lamps look smeared and the world tired. By the time I got back to the brownstone, it was past 11. Wolfe was at his desk, beer frosted, expression unreadable. Well, he asked. She's booked. Kramer's men got it all on wire. Jones clear. He nodded once. Then the world is marginally less offensive. Saul sends regards. Commendable. I dropped into my chair. You know, hearing you through that phone was eerie, like God doing play-by-play. Archie, he said, I neither meddle nor manifest. I deduce. Fine, but next time try deducing before somebody starts shooting. He gave a small, satisfied grunt. Your levity persists, which indicates no lasting trauma. Fritz will bring the tray. As if on cue, Fritz appeared with coffee and a plate of apple strudel. Wolfe reached for the cup, eyes half closing in ritual contentment. So ends the matter, he said. For now, I replied. But you might want to keep that phone patched. Manhattan's full of people with recording habits. He actually smiled. Then we shall never want for occupation. I raised my cup. To sound and fury. He raised his. And to silence thereafter. The clock chimed midnight. Somewhere uptown, the Blue Piper played its last tune. There are nights when the brownstone feels like a cathedral. The air gets heavy, the lamps burn low, and Wolfe's voice starts to sound less like English and more like fate being spoken aloud. That night was one of them. At Inspector Kramer's insistence, and with the district attorney's blessing, the formal statement was taken here, under Wolfe's recording equipment, rather than at headquarters. At 8 the next evening, Fritz had cleared the dinner service. Lydia Eversley sat stiffly in the red chair nearest the door, still dressed for mourning, still looking like she thought the world owed her a receipt for her suffering. Joan Loring, pale but steady, sat opposite, her gloved hands clasped like a prayer she didn't expect to be answered. Kramer loomed near the globe stand, chewing his cigar to pulp, while Saul Panzer leaned against the bookcase with his arms folded, as cool and quiet as the rain. Wolfe, behind his desk, was the center of gravity. He didn't rise, didn't smile. He just waited until every breath in the room had fallen into his rhythm, then said, "This house is not a court of law, Mrs. Eversley. It is merely a refuge for truth. If you prefer the former, Inspector Kramer can accommodate you immediately." Kramer grunted, smoke curling from his mouth. "Don't tempt me." Lydia's chin lifted. "You can't frighten me with talk, Mr. Wolfe." "Madam," Wolfe said mildly, "my talk is not intended to frighten. It is intended to clarify. You are mistaken only if you believe yourself innocent of orchestration." "I have nothing to hide." "Indeed? Then we shall proceed with indulgent thoroughness." He nodded at me, and I flipped open the notebook on my lap. "Proceed with the record, Archie." "Record reads," I said, "that at approximately 11:40 on the night of April 2nd, a call was placed from your residence to the Blue Piper Club. The recipient, Mr. Kells, was informed he had become an inconvenience. 2 hours later, he was dead." "That's absurd," she snapped. "Anyone could have used my phone." Wolfe gestured lazily toward the phonograph on the table. "But not anyone possesses your inflection, your cadence, or your vanity." I hit the switch. The recorded voice filled the office again, Lydia's cold and measured. "Kells must be silenced tonight. Use Panzer's name if you must." Her face drained of colour. The sound of it was enough to make Joan shiver. Wolfe waited until the reel clicked to its end before speaking again. "That, madam, is not forgery. It is documentation. Yet even now you might imagine yourself misrepresented, so I shall outline the architecture of your crime in its proper order." He leaned forward, fingers steepled. "You discovered your husband's treachery, not of affection, but of conscience. Arthur Eversley was selling defense designs to foreign intermediaries. You feared the scandal would ruin your name and his career. Thus you sought to prevent exposure by eliminating the intermediary, Mr. Kells. To do so discreetly, you required an expendable accomplice, Miss Loring." Joan's voice trembled. "She said it was a message, not a murder." "Precisely," Wolfe said. "And when the act exceeded her intention, you compounded it. You contrived your husband's suicide, ensuring his guilt would die with him." Lydia rose abruptly, trembling. "That's a monstrous lie." Kramer took his cigar from his teeth. "Sit down, Mrs. Eversley." "I will not," she cried. "You're all conspiring against me. You think because I had money, because I married well, I must be wicked." Wolfe raised one hand. The gesture alone silenced her. "Madam, your wickedness is not financial. It is spiritual. You sought control over consequence and you failed. Even now you might have concealed yourself within your husband's shadow, had you not attempted to frame my operative." She turned toward Saul, her voice shrill. "He was watching me, spying." Saul didn't flinch. "You paid me to," he said evenly. Wolfe's tone dropped to a dangerous softness. "Indeed, and by arranging that surveillance you hoped to make him appear complicit in Kells's death. It was crude but sufficient, until you forgot one detail." She swallowed. "What detail?" "The absence of motive. Mr. Pantzer had none. You, however, had two: fear and pride. Fear that your name would appear in the papers, and pride that no man, not even your husband, would dictate your fate." Her hands gripped the chair arms, white-knuckled. The storm outside groaned again, the thunder now directly above. Kramer's voice was low. "Wolfe, you got enough for the DA?" Wolfe didn't look at him. "That depends on whether Mrs. Eversley intends to spare him the effort." For a moment, no one breathed. Then Lydia whispered, "I didn't mean for it to go so far." Joan covered her mouth, eyes wide. Lydia sank back into the chair. "Arthur wanted out. He said he couldn't stand the guilt. He was going to confess everything. The contracts, the payments, all of it. Her voice broke. "I only wanted to stop him from ruining us." Kramer stepped forward. "You ordered Kells dead?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, but Arthur's death, it wasn't supposed to happen that way. He found out. He said he'd go to the police himself. I begged him not to." She pressed her hands to her temples. "He took the revolver. I only meant to stop him. The struggle ended with one bullet," Wolfe finished quietly. "You arranged the note afterward. You forged his farewell to match his guilt." She wept then, shoulders shaking, pearls clattering softly to the carpet. Wolfe's face did not change. Kramer exhaled smoke through his nose. "That's a confession, Wolfe." "Yes, Inspector. A lament more than a statement, but sufficient in law." He turned his gaze to Joan. "Miss Loring, you will, of course, be exonerated of complicity beyond coercion." Joan whispered, "I never wanted anyone hurt." "I am aware." Kramer motioned to the door. "My men'll take it from here." Fritz appeared silently with two officers and led Lydia out. Her sobs trailed down the hall until the front door closed behind them. The room felt oddly hollow afterward. The thunder rolled farther away now, leaving only the faint hiss of rain. Kramer stubbed out his cigar and pocketed the remains. "You win again, Wolfe. I'd say congratulations, but it sticks in my throat." Wolfe inclined his head. "Then merely nod, Inspector. I shall regard it as applause." Kramer almost smiled. "All right, you get your nod." He turned to go, then paused. "Panzer's cleared?" "Wholly." "Good. He's one of the few you've got I don't mind working with." With that, he left. Saul lingered, looking mildly embarrassed by the compliment. "Guess I owe you a beer, boss." Wolfe grunted. "You owe me nothing, Mr. Panzer. It is the Republic that owes you discretion." When Saul had gone, Wolfe reached for his bell cord. "Fritz." "Yes, sir." "Brandy for Mr. Goodwin. Beer for me." I raised an eyebrow. "You don't often prescribe therapy for witnesses." "Phooey, I prescribe closure." He leaned back in the chair, eyes heavy but alive. "Archie, the symmetry of justice is not always elegant, but it is adequate." "Sure," I said, taking the brandy. Score 1 for the sedentary squad. He looked at me over the rim of his glass. You mock, but without immobility, reflection is impossible. A man who walks incessantly sees only dust. Yeah, but a man who never walks misses the view. He gave a rumble of amusement, the closest Wolfe gets to laughter. Your resilience, Archie, remains an enigma, yet I confess, he paused, savouring the word, I am gratified. Don't go soft on me now, I said. Next you'll be buying me flowers. He closed his eyes. Spare me the torment. Outside, the thunder rolled once more, faint and final. The orchids upstairs would be safe in their mist, and the city, for a few hours at least, would sleep clean. I wrote the final line of the report, signed it, and shut the notebook. Case closed, I said. Wolfe didn't answer. He'd already turned to the window, watching the rain with that stillness that means his mind's chewing on something only it can taste. I took my brandy, clinked it softly against his untouched beer, and muttered to myself, to order restored, and to Wolfe taking the floor. Mornings in the brownstone have a way of erasing the grime of the night before. By 11, the air in the orchid rooms was thick with perfume and peace, two commodities in short supply during the last few days. Wolfe sat in his yellow chair, beer in hand, watching the mist drift over the rows of orchids like a satisfied general inspecting his troops after a battle that hadn't quite killed him. Saul Panzer stood by the door, hat in hand, looking as uncomfortable as a man can look while surrounded by flowers worth more than his car. I figured I'd stop in, he said. Didn't want to let the Gazette do all the thanking. Wolfe inclined his head without rising. The Gazette is frequently imprecise. You, Mr. Panzer, are not. Saul smiled faintly. Headlines clean anyway. Private operative cleared in Blueprint's murders. Cohen said he had to fight 3 editors to get the word cleared instead of linked. Commendable, Wolfe said, setting down his glass. Though I assume he'll recoup the favour in publicity at my expense. That's the plan, I said from the corner, notebook balanced on my knee. He's running a sidebar titled The Sedentary Sleuth Strikes Again. You'll hate it. Wolfe grunted, a sound somewhere between dignity and indigestion. If notoriety is the price of competence, I shall remit it in silence. Saul's eyes moved over the rows of orchids, the glass panes shining with late morning sun. You keep this place the same, no matter what happens out there, he said quietly. That, Wolfe replied, is the only sensible defence against human unpredictability. Saul nodded. Still, I owe you. And Archie. I waved it off. All in a night's work. Though next time you take a phone call past midnight, try not to make it from a murder scene. He chuckled. Fair warning. Wolfe cleared his throat. There will be no next time. The world contains sufficient peril without volunteering for more. You are absolved, Mr. Panzer, but not encouraged. Saul gave him a half-smile that counted as gratitude in his language. Understood. And the rest of my fee? Wolfe's brows lifted. Retain it. Justice, Mr. Panzer, is remuneration enough. I scribbled a note and said, Fine, I'll bill justice for mileage. That earned the smallest, most reluctant twitch at the corner of Wolfe's mouth. Your levity, Archie, is incorrigible. Sure, I said, but it keeps the lights on. Fritz appeared briefly with a tray, fresh beer for Wolfe, coffee for me, and a small plate of cheese that vanished faster than Saul's discomfort. When he was gone, Wolfe leaned back, gazing at the flowers. Observe, he said, they are exquisite because they are governed. Each bloom permitted no excess, no deceit, no vanity. Man, by contrast, is incapable of such restraint. He believes control lies in domination, when in truth it resides in order. Try telling that to the late Mrs. Eversley, I said. I did, Wolfe replied evenly, and she confessed. Saul shook his head. Guess that's one way to prune humanity. Wolfe took a